Hi, welcome. Today I want to talk about my favorite fiction novels, the novels that have changed me as a person, as a reader, and have highly influenced me. And this is not the same as a favorite authors list. Of course, there is some overlap, but favorite books are not favorite authors. And I also want to mention that this list will change, no doubt. As I am evolving as a reader and as a person, I am changing, I am discovering more books and more works, and I am sure that some of these books will disappear over the course of the coming decades. So I've been a reader for a long time, obviously. I've been reading all my life, and I've read a lot of books, so I have some books to show you that really left a mark on me. Some of these books you will be, of course, able to guess if you've been following my channel for a while, because I talk about my favorite books a lot. So the reason why I've never done such a list before is because I feel like it's too prone to change, and I'm afraid that I will give you my list now and that it will be different next year. But you know, that's the way it is. This list can change. Okay, you will notice from the stories that I picked that I love grand and emotional storylines. I love tragic tales. I love stories that delve deeply into human suffering, redemption, passion, the consequences of moral choices. I really value complex characters, psychological depth, lines that make me think and reflect. I love character-driven stories, and I love it when the time period that the story is set in is of great influence on the characters. I actually only started tracking my books in 2019 when I was 24, and I wish I had started tracking my books sooner, but here we are. And I went through all of my lists, but I actually immediately knew which books were going to end up on this list. But if you do the math, that is 6 years of about 80 works a year, which ends at around 500 works. All right, let's dive in. The first book is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. If you've been following me, you know that Oscar Wilde is also on my list of favorite authors. I love his writing style, I love his wit. I loved reading his biography about his life. You know, he was such an interesting person, and it reflects in his writing. He has only written one novel, unfortunately. His theater plays are phenomenal. If you haven't read them, The Importance of Being Earnest is really one of my top favorites, but they're all really good. And his letter, De Profundis, is so heartbreakingly good. But since we are talking about fiction novels here, I picked The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is one of the first classics that I ever read, and it got me started. Well, it sparked my love for classics, and I started my journey because of this book. This is about vanity and corruption, and as time ages, Dorian himself is keeping his youth, keeping his beauty, while his portrait bears the marks of his sins. I would also like to read you a couple of passages from each of the books that I have selected. But this book hit me really, really hard and made me hungry for self-reflection and to find books that make me self-reflect. But this book sparked my hunger for self-reflection, to find deep psychological insights in books, to find passages that really spark deep thoughts. So let me read you 2 quotes. "The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame." And the second quote, "There is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about." So this novel is full of witty, clever sentences. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Next on my list, let me read you the quotes first, and then we'll see if you can guess. It's worse for the guilty than for the innocent. Second quote, I have no right to enter into all the details of your feelings, and generally I consider it useless and even harmful. Rummaging in our souls, we often dig up something that ought to have lain there unnoticed. I know this doesn't say a lot, but oh my gosh, these sentences are so beautiful. I'm talking about Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I love Tolstoy's stories, and I must admit that I was in doubt for a few seconds, whether to pick War and Peace or Anna Karenina, because I love both books. But in the end, I went for Anna Karenina because, I don't know, it resonates a little bit more with me. This is about passion, infidelity, and the struggles of living in Imperial Russia. I also really love the first line of this novel. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And this first sentence, it just immediately sets the mood. It kind of shows what to expect. It's all in that line. And I really love that. So, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. By the way, I should also mention how many times I've read a certain novel on this list. So as for Dorian Gray, I read it 3 times, and Anna Karenina only once, and I am so excited to do my second reading of this book. I think I might read it this year or next year, but yes, some of these I have read only once, but it was love at first sight, you know. Okay, next. You will be guessing this one just from the size and probably from the amount of times that I showed this book on my channel. It is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This is the Penguin Classics edition, which is easy to read. It's a floppy, despite its size, it didn't really bother me. And the translation is really good. It's translated by Robin Buss. Really good. And this novel blew me away, not because of his writing style, because Alexandre Dumas is, I don't know, I'm not really fond of his writing style because I don't have a single quote to share with you from this book because I didn't mark any. And that means that there weren't any sentences that really blew me away. It's just he was such a masterful storyteller. This is his biggest strength. Of course, he had an entire team to do his brainstorming and to do his writing with him, and it really shows because this is just, the plot is masterfully done. And I know it's a very big book, but it's so addictive. I cannot recommend it enough. Let me see. Okay, so I don't have any quotes, but this is about a man who gets unjustly accused of committing a crime, and he escapes from his prison and he is out for revenge. But I wouldn't say this is 100% about revenge. It's more about the consequences of revenge and why it's not really a good thing. So yeah, a really good novel. I have only read this once, last year, I think, or 2 years ago. I don't know, I think last year. I don't remember. Anyway, I am so excited to dive into the story for the second time and notice different things this time around. So, my next one is one that I have read last year. It is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I picked this one for the book club last year and I'm really glad that I did. It was on my list for such a long time and somehow I thought I wasn't going to like it. I don't know why. It was a feeling, and this book blew me away. Very different, by the way, from The Count of Monte Cristo, because The Count is very plot-driven, character-driven. This is very character-focused. Not a lot is happening. There's not a lot of external conflict going on. It's all about internal conflict here. And the only way I can describe it is that this is a story about provincial life. That's it. The people living in this village are all connected to each other somehow. They influence each other's life. There's a lot of focus on the love stories, and it really gripped me. And I must say that George Eliot's writing style is less accessible. It's a bit more difficult. So it might not be a good pick if you're new to the classics. And I think native English speakers will find it more easy to read her. So here's a quote from Middlemarch. "It would be my duty to study that I might help him the better in his great works. There would be nothing trivial about our lives. Everyday things with us would mean the greatest things." And this quote reminds me that there's a lot of love for study in this book, love for literature, and that was also a part that I really love, because Dorothea Brooke she's not really a woman of her time, in the sense that she wants to marry a man to help him with his studies. She wants to read to him. She wants to help him translate things. There are a lot of references also concerning the medical world, and this book really shows how smart George Eliot really was. She was such a bright woman. She kept a lot of commonplace books on the topics that she was studying, and I really admire her as an author as well. I've only read it once, fell in love immediately, and I'm excited for a reread. The next novel on my list. Beauty is that quality which, next to money, is generally the most attractive to the worst kinds of men, and therefore is likely to entail a great deal of trouble on the possessor. That is quote 1. Quote 2, there is always a chance of death, and it is always well to live with such a chance in view. This is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This is my favorite novel that I've read from all of the Bronte sisters. And the reason why is firstly because of Anne's writing style. She writes so beautifully. Secondly, because of the storyline, it felt very personal, very raw. And the main character is so true to the time that she's living in. You're frustrated with her, but it all makes so much sense. So this is about a woman who fled from her past life, and she ends up in a new town, and she gives her diary to someone to read her story. And so we get to know what happened, why she ran away, and why her life has come crashing down. I know this is kind of a surprising choice, because first of all, I never see anyone talk about The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. It's such a forgotten classic. Everyone is talking about Wuthering Heights or, other more famous novels from the Bronte sisters. This is such a forgotten one, and I also have a review on my channel, no spoilers. So if you're interested in knowing more about this one, I've only read it once, and I cannot wait. I know I say it about every book that I pick, but these are my favorites for a reason. It completely blew me away, and it's going to be fun to reread this one. I'm sorry if I sound a bit weird because I'm still a little bit sick. Okay, so the next one I have on my list is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Again, for a few seconds, I was in doubt, am I going to pick The Lord of the Rings? And I immediately thought, no, I love The Silmarillion so much more. I've read it 3 times. The first time was very difficult. I didn't take notes. I went too fast. I didn't digest it. And then the second time, I went very slow. I made a summary. I added pictures. I really put in the work, and I enjoyed it much more. And the third time reading this story, it blew me away. It is so good. This is my Bible, and It's a compilation of short stories set in Middle Earth, and it's full of mythology, beautiful meanings, beautiful writing, and I just love this work to pieces. I also have videos about J.R.R. Tolkien's works on my channel, and I also have a video specifically on the Silmarillion and how to read it, in the hope to make it less intimidating and more easy for people who feel intimidated by the work to get started. Allow me to read you the beginning of the Silmarillion. There was Eru, the one who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his Dod, and they were with him before aught else was made. So you notice that the writing feels very archaic. The sentences are rather long. You really have to focus. Perhaps you can combine it with an audiobook. There is die and thaw. And let me see if I can find a quote. Here's one. His envy grew then, the greater within him, and he also took visible form. But because of his mood and the malice that burned in him, that form was dark and terrible. Obviously, this isn't for everyone because it's a fantasy novel. You have to be into the genre, and you also have to be familiar with the other works that Tolkien wrote, like The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. This is really going to help you ease into the Silmarillion. Before I move on to the more modern novels, I have 2 more classics to show you. These books will never be removed from my top 10 list. I know that you know which ones they are if you've been following me. They will never move from this list, ever, 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 ever. The first one is Notre Dame de Paris from Victor Hugo. This book, and I'm not overreacting when I state this, changed my life. This is the book, okay? This is my book. I want to be buried with this book. This is how much it means to me. And I want to tell you a couple of very personal things concerning this book. So, as a child, yes, we're going there, I fell in love with the Disney version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I watch it every day, and knowing that version inside out, knowing the book inside out, because I've read it about 7 times, I studied this book. And I will return to that in a moment as to why I studied the book. Knowing both of them inside out, I can say with my whole heart that the Disney version is phenomenal. They did such a wonderful job. The passion is, the project is full of passion. You really notice how much love that they had for this story. There are so many little and big references to it. Of course, there are also some big changes because it remains a children's adaptation. But one of the things that makes that movie so great is the atmosphere they created, partly because of the music. The music, the vibe of that movie is spot on. And Alan Menken himself said that the music for The Hunchback that he did back then in the 1900s was his masterpiece, the best music that he ever did, and I fully agree. But anyway, that's how my love for this novel began, because it began as a child. I fell in love with the story and with the themes, with the messages, with the vibe. And I started reading, it's a very difficult book. I started reading it way too soon because obviously me as a teenager, I was like, I love that story so much, I need to read the book. But I just wasn't ready. This book is full of digressions. It is old language. It comes with so many challenges. Victor Hugo is one of the most difficult authors that I have ever read, but he's also my favorite author. for so many reasons, by the way. So I just wanted to take a moment to tell you where it all started. So the first time that I read it as a teenager, of course, I failed miserably. I read it about 3 times before I started really appreciating what Hugo has done. And I'm just so glad to say that this is one of the best, most beautiful, tragic stories that I have ever read. My love for it will never go away. And to return to the research, to return to the study that I have done, and why I studied this book is because I have written a retelling of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's in Flemish, so it's not like to make you purchase it. I'm not mentioning that at all because you cannot read it. It's not in English. I do want to show it to you for those who are curious, but this is my retelling of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, just to give you an impression of how much this novel changed my life. When I translate the title, it is called The Ghost of Versailles. It is set, instead of in the medieval period, I set it at the time of Versailles under the Sun King, and I just did a lot of research. I studied the book very thoroughly, and it was kind of a passion project because when the Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire, I started working on this story, and that event really, it broke something in me. I love architecture and old buildings, and Victor Hugo was also a lover of Gothic and old architecture, and the Notre Dame was falling into decay. By writing this book, people started visiting the cathedral again, and they started renovating it. So he saved the cathedral, and it's my favorite place in the world. When I visit the cathedral in Paris, I always cry. I always cry. And I'm not religious, it's just because of Hugo, because of his story, because of the story behind the story, and it's the place, the one place in the world that means the most to me, except for my home, of course. Which leads me to the next event, because I was in the middle of doing research for my novel, and I was obsessing with Notre Dame, of course, always. And we were traveling to Paris and to Versailles because I wanted to do some more research and everything. And he proposed there in front of the cathedral because he knew how much this novel means to me and how much that place means to me. So yes, this all happened because of this novel. And then there's one more thing that I want to share, and it's really nerdy, I guess. And this is really the final thing that I'm going to say about it. I had rings from my grandparents in gold, and I had them melted into the window of Notre Dame Cathedral. And this is the necklace that you always see me wearing. These are the rings of my grandparents, but it's also a symbol of my love for this novel because it's the window of the cathedral. And so, yes, this is how much that book means to me. I cannot put it into words, but I guess this is giving you an idea. So to give you an idea of the vibe, here is a quote. "I love thee," he cried again. "What love?" said the unhappy girl with a shudder. He resumed, "The love of a damned soul." And here's another really great quote. Claude Frollo had taught him to speak, to read, to write. Claude Frollo, in fine, had made him ringer of the bells. And to give the great bell in marriage to Quasimodo was giving Juliet to Romeo. I've been talking about this for way too long, so let me just tell you, it is a Gothic tragedy about love and obsession, and it is set in medieval Paris. And then, of course, another novel that will never disappear from my top 10 list, Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. Again, Hugo. I love this book so much. It's about social injustice, redemption, love. It has so many beautiful themes, and I just love this book so much. It's so good. I have talked about this on my channel quite some times. If you do a search on Les Misérables, you will find some results if you're interested. So go and check that out if you want to. I've, by the way, read it 3 times now, and I cannot wait to read it again. To sin as little as possible is a law for men. To sin not at all is a dream for angels. All earthly things are subject to sin. It is like the force of gravity. Second quote, teach the ignorant as much as you can. Society is to blame for not giving free education. It is responsible for the darkness it creates. And the third quote, destruction may be necessary, but I mistrust it when it is inspired by rage. This is one of those books that I think everyone should at least try to read once in their life. Then the final 2 novels that I want to talk about, this is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This was his first novel, I think, that he wrote. I think he's the least proud of it, but it's my personal favorite. I've read it twice, and it's just one of my favorite fantasy stories next to, The Silmarillion, The Lord of the Rings. I love this book. I don't have a quote, but I do want to read you the first sentence because, again, it says so much about the novel. Prince Raoden of Arelon woke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity. I love that first sentence, and it actually makes me want to read it again because it's been a couple of years ago. And then finally, I have The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. The reason why I picked this one, I've only read it once, but the reason why I picked it is because it's one of the novels, the more recent novels that I read that completely blew me away. I'm currently reading his final novel in the series. I think it's number 5. And when I compare all of them, this one is just a completely different level. If you pick one of his, I would say go for The Pillars of the Earth. It really blew me away. The story is centered around the building of a cathedral, and it's about different families, different lives, and they're all connected to each other somehow. He's a masterful storyteller. I'm not that fond of his writing style, but just like Alexandre Dumas, he is just so good at crafting his stories and his characters. The characters in this novel are just, they're so, so good. So yes, those were my 10 books that I selected to talk to you about today. I'll probably come with a different list next year or in a couple of years, who knows. But that's fine. We all change, we all evolve, and that is part of being a reader. There would be something terribly wrong if one doesn't evolve and doesn't change. We get to know different stories, different authors throughout our lives, and it is completely normal to find new favorites. Sharing your favorite books has something very personal, because I think someone's favorite books says a lot about the person itself and about the things that they look for and the things that they appreciate. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I talk about books, and I would love to see you again. Thank you so much for watching.